My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 32 years old. When my older brother finished graduate school, our father handed him the keys to a luxury condominium in downtown Chicago. When I earned my degree, I was given an aging farmhouse and a neglected piece of countryside. Dad barely looked at me. "Take the old property," he said flatly. "At least if something goes wrong, it won't matter." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I packed my things and moved there. 3 years later, my flower fields became one of the most shared gardens on social media. That's when my mother suddenly appeared. She didn't come to congratulate me. She didn't ask how I'd survived. She arrived with a demand. "You have 72 hours to hand this place over. Your brother needs it, now." What she never realized was that the garden wasn't the only thing I'd spent those years building. 3 days later, my brother drove through the gate expecting to claim everything without resistance. He never even made it to the front porch before his expression changed completely. He assumed I could simply hand it back. He had no idea how much had changed, or what I legally controlled now. That was the moment everything turned upside down. The story really began 7 years earlier. In May 2019, my brother Ethan Bennett graduated from Northwestern University's MBA program. He was 30 years old, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, already convinced success belonged to him. The whole family celebrated at an upscale steakhouse downtown. 6 of us shared a table, and when dinner ended, the check came to $540. Ethan ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu without hesitation. Dad never even glanced at the total. Halfway through dessert, he stood. Richard Bennett, then 57, had spent decades building a successful transportation company and carried himself like every room belonged to him. He raised his glass. "Ethan, your mother and I want you focused on building your future, so we've bought you a home." Ethan smiled before Dad even finished speaking. Mom, Laura, then 53, looked as though she'd been waiting months for this moment. "Downtown Chicago," Dad continued. "26th floor, around 1,100 square feet. You can move in next month." The table fell silent. Then Ethan laughed. Not because he was surprised, because he expected nothing less. "Seriously? You bought me an apartment?" Dad nodded. "Cost us about $915,000, and we're giving you another $18,000 to furnish it properly." Ethan immediately embraced both of them. Mom wiped away tears. Dad's eyes even watered. They celebrated him like every sacrifice they'd ever made had finally paid off. I sat quietly across the table. I was only 21, watching everything unfold. In my head, I added the numbers. Apartment, furniture, more than $930,000 invested in my brother's future. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Your day will come too, sweetheart." I believed every word. 3 years later, in May 2022, I graduated with a degree in environmental and agricultural sciences. My GPA was 3.8. I had worked part-time throughout college and managed to keep my student debt below $24,000. I thought I'd done everything right. Instead of an expensive restaurant, we celebrated at a neighborhood diner. The entire bill came to $79. There were no speeches, no surprises. Dad barely lifted his eyes from the menu. Mom casually asked what I planned to do after graduation. I told her I was still considering my options. Ethan wasn't there. He sent a quick text. "Congrats, Claire. Proud of you. Keep going." That was it. My closest friend Megan came instead. She had saved for weeks to buy me a pair of handmade silver earrings decorated with tiny lavender blossoms. They probably cost around $55, but to her, they meant much more. She earned modestly as a graphic designer, so I knew it wasn't an easy purchase. Her gift meant more than everything else I received that day. After lunch, I kept waiting. Maybe Dad had something planned. Maybe Mom wanted to speak privately. Nothing happened. 3 days later, Dad called. "Come over. We need to discuss your future." Not my achievement, not my graduation, my future. I arrived that afternoon at my parents' home. Dad handed me a thick folder. "We're transferring a property into your name." Inside were ownership documents. 14 acres in rural New York. A farmhouse built in 1979, untouched for decades. Mom smiled. "It's been in the family for years. We've just been paying taxes on it." I flipped through the paperwork until I found the appraisal. Estimated value, $235,000. A yellow sticky note was attached in Dad's handwriting. "Only worth the land. House should probably be demolished." "You're giving me this?" I asked quietly. Dad leaned back. "Take it. At least you can't damage anything valuable." Then he added another detail. "Annual property taxes are about $4,800. They're yours now." I froze. I had less than $5,000 in savings. 1 year's taxes would nearly empty my account. Did Ethan also have to pay everything himself? Mom hesitated. His situation was different. How different? Dad answered without emotion. "We gave him $18,000 to furnish the apartment." I looked back down. Ethan had received well over $930,000. I was receiving property worth barely a quarter of that. The difference wasn't just money. It told me exactly where I stood in their hearts. I closed the folder. "All right," I said. Dad looked genuinely surprised. "You'll accept it?" "Yes." Mom smiled with relief. "You'll enjoy it. It's quiet, surrounded by nature, perfect for someone who likes flowers." Someone who liked flowers. Not someone who had spent years studying ecosystems, soil restoration, and sustainable farming. I left without another word. On the drive home, I pulled into an empty parking lot and sat there for nearly half an hour before calling Megan. "They gave me a farm," I said. "That's incredible!" "It's worth less than a third of what they spent on Ethan." Silence. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm going to make this place worth more than anything they ever gave him." At that moment, I had absolutely no idea how I would do it, but I knew I would. "What are you planning to do with the rest of the land?" she asked. "Most of it isn't usable yet," I replied. "I'm working on it." She reached into her bag and handed me a business card. Dr. Hannah Carter, Sustainable Agriculture Specialist, Cornell Cooperative Extension. I studied the card. "Can I see your property?" she asked. "Why?" "Because 15 acres holds far more potential than selling tomatoes for $4 each. You don't realize what you're standing on." I looked from the card back to her. "All right. Thursday, 2 o'clock, and don't tidy anything up. I want to see the land exactly as it is." She walked away. That afternoon, I sold 5 more tomatoes. I drove home with $72 in cash. After paying the market fee, I had earned only $44. Still, I carefully placed Dr. Carter's card on the refrigerator. August 7th, 2022, 2 p.m. She arrived exactly on time in a dark green Subaru. "Show me everything," she said. We walked across the property. Every few dozen feet, she stopped, knelt, and collected soil samples. 7 containers, each carefully labeled. "What are you checking?" I asked. "Soil composition, acidity, drainage." "For what?" She stood and brushed the dirt from her jeans. "You're sitting on land that could make serious money if you grow the right crop." I waited. "Vegetables are wasting this property." "So what should I grow?" She smiled. "Lavender." I blinked. "Lavender?" "High-value crop. Doesn't demand rich soil, loves dry ground, full sun, and gentle slopes." She pointed across the hillside. "Your drainage is excellent. The slope is nearly perfect. You get more than 8 hours of sunlight every day." I nodded. I'll send the lab results in a couple of days, but honestly, she looked across the field again. I'm almost certain this land was made for lavender. She handed me a sheet of paper. Once established, lavender can generate between $22,000 and $35,000 per acre each year if it's managed properly. I stared at the numbers. 20,000 per acre. I owned 15. Interested? She asked. I don't have money to start. How much do you have? I hesitated. Maybe 5,000? She didn't react. Then don't plant 15 acres. Start with 250 plants. Learn first, expand later. How much? Plants will cost around $1,100. A basic drip irrigation system, about $3,500. My stomach tightened. I can't spend that much. She met my eyes. Then find a way. Borrow it. Earn it. Otherwise, you'll still be selling tomatoes one customer at a time 10 years from now? She climbed back into her car. Before driving away, she lowered the window. Call me when you're ready to build a business instead of simply surviving. I sat on the porch for nearly an hour. Plants, irrigation, everything together came to roughly $4,600. I had just over $4,900 in the bank. If I spent it all, I'd have almost nothing left. That evening, I called my best friend. Megan, I need to borrow some money. How much? About $3,500? Silence. Claire, that's a lot. I know. I'll pay you back with interest. What's it for? I explained everything, the lavender, the soil, Dr. Carter's plan. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. Okay. Really? I believe in you. I'll transfer it tomorrow. Don't worry about paying me back until you're making money. And you will. After we hung up, I cried. The first time I'd allowed myself to cry in months. The money arrived the next morning. I immediately ordered 250 lavender plants from a nursery in Oregon. Then I purchased the irrigation system. After every payment cleared, my bank balance was just $19. I had never felt so terrified or so committed. I was all in. At Thanksgiving, I drove to my parents' house. My brother was there with his girlfriend, Olivia, who worked in public relations. Dinner revolved entirely around Ethan. He talked about investments, digital assets, and market opportunities for nearly an hour. Dad listened with admiration. Finally, he looked at me. How's the property? Good. Glad to hear it. That was the end of our conversation. 5 seconds, nothing more. I cried most of the drive home. During the winter, I worked remotely almost every day while expanding the farm. By spring, I had saved enough to order another 1,500 lavender plants using a payment plan. My Instagram page barely had 160 followers, but I kept posting. Almost nobody reacted. Still, I kept posting. One afternoon, Ethan called. Hey, you still own that land? Yes. A friend of mine is looking for cheap property outside the city. Interested in selling? No. Come on, you could probably get around $290,000 for it. More than Dad once claimed it was worth. Still nowhere close to what had been spent on Ethan. I'm keeping it. Suit yourself. He hung up. The first serious harvest finally arrived. The original plants produced nearly 100 pounds of dried lavender. I sold every bundle at farmers markets. Financially, I still lost money after expenses, but something far more important happened. People began placing advance orders for the following year. Wedding planners, gift shops, a small company that produced essential oils. I wrote every customer into a notebook. Each name reminded me that the dream was becoming real. By autumn, I reinvested everything. I even took on credit card debt to expand the fields. Soon, more than half my land was covered in lavender. I worked nearly 70 hours every week. Farm work, remote work, weekend markets. Exhaustion became normal. By April 2024, something finally changed. For the first time, the farm turned a profit. I stared at my banking app. More than $7,000 sat in my account. I smiled. Not because of the money, because it proved I had been right. The abandoned farm could become something extraordinary. A month later, Dr. Carter returned, blooming lavender. She smiled. "You're ready." Ready for what? To meet people who see what I saw the first day I walked onto this land. June 2025. One evening, the setting sun covered the fields in golden light. The lavender looked endless. I recorded a short video, 45 seconds. No music, no filters, just purple fields moving in the wind. I posted it with one sentence. 3 years ago, this land was forgotten. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin where everyone else has already given up. I put my phone away and kept watering. An hour later, the video had 15,000 views. An hour later, the video had 15,000 views. Another hour, more than 400,000. By midnight, it had crossed 1 million. That night, I didn't sleep once. That night, I barely slept. Every hour, I checked my phone. June 20th, 2025, 7 a.m., 2.4 million views. By the following evening, 9.1 million. More than 9 million people had watched a short video of my lavender fields. My inbox became impossible to manage. Hundreds of direct messages arrived every hour. Some simply wrote, "This is breathtaking. Can visitors come? Where is this farm?" Others were from businesses. A regional lifestyle magazine wanted an interview. Several wedding planners asked about booking the property. An essential oil manufacturer wanted wholesale pricing. Then I noticed one message that felt different. June 26th, 2025, 10:18 a.m. Claire, we invest in sustainable agricultural businesses, and your story caught our attention. Would you be interested in a conversation? Daniel Morgan, Senior Investment Director, Evergreen Capital Partners. I immediately searched the company. They were real. A respected investment group specializing in environmentally focused businesses. Their portfolio included vineyards, organic farms, beekeeping companies, and botanical brands. I closed the browser. I wasn't ready to answer. In only 1 week, my social media following exploded, from barely 9,000 followers to more than 140,000. Orders poured in. Candles, dried bouquets, essential oils, gift boxes. Monthly revenue climbed past $21,000. Only a month earlier, I'd made less than $5,000. Wedding reservations started arriving for the following spring. 8 couples paid deposits before ever visiting the farm. For the first time, I felt something changing. I called Megan. "I think something huge is happening." She laughed. "I've been telling you that for years." The next morning, Ethan called. For the first time in almost 2 years. I ignored it. A voicemail appeared. "Hey Claire, saw your video. Looks amazing. We should grab coffee sometime. Give me a call." I listened once, then deleted it. 2 years without asking whether I was alive. Now, one viral video later, he suddenly remembered he had a sister. I blocked the number. A day later, I phoned Dr. Carter. Someone from Evergreen Capital contacted me. Who? Daniel Morgan. There was a short pause. He's legitimate. Before you reply, hire an attorney. A lawyer? Claire, if investors are calling, you've built something valuable. Don't negotiate alone. You're no longer just the woman growing lavender. She recommended an agricultural business attorney, Rachel Alvarez. Her consultation fee wasn't cheap, but I booked it anyway. Rachel's office overlooked the Hudson River. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. What do you actually want? Investment? Control? Growth? I hesitated. I'm not sure. She smiled. Figure that out before your first meeting. Otherwise, they'll decide for you? She read the investment email carefully, then looked up. Companies like this don't contact hobby farms. They contact businesses they believe could eventually be worth 7 figures. I stared at her. You're saying... I'm saying your land, your brand, and your audience, together they're likely worth well over $1 million. For a moment, I couldn't speak. 3 years earlier, Dad had called the property nearly worthless. Now a lawyer was telling me it could be worth over $1 million. Do I have to sell? Absolutely not. If you ever negotiate, don't negotiate only for money. Negotiate for ownership. Make sure they need you as much as you need them. A few days later, it was Dad's birthday. Mom invited me to dinner. I hadn't visited in months. When I arrived, she hugged me. You look wonderful. Thank you. Your farm looks beautiful. I saw the video. Congratulations. I waited. I thought she'd finally ask about the business, the investors, the customers. Instead, she asked, "Can you help set the table?" That was the entire conversation. A few minutes later, I walked past the kitchen. Mom was talking on the phone. She didn't know I could hear. I don't care what it takes. Figure something out. A long pause. The condo was already refinanced. Another pause. Then her voice dropped. How could he lose almost $1 million? I stopped walking. Nearly $1 million. Private lenders? She sounded horrified. Those interest rates are impossible. We only have a few weeks. Where are we supposed to find that kind of money? I stepped into the kitchen. Mom turned around. Her face lost all color. Claire, I didn't hear you come in. How long have you been standing there? Long enough? Dinner began later than planned. Ethan arrived almost an hour late. He looked completely different. He'd lost weight. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. Dad asked how work was going. I'm figuring things out. Translation, he didn't have a job. And the investments? Dad asked carefully. Markets changed. I looked directly at him. Stocks? Crypto? He avoided my eyes. A little of everything. Mom interrupted immediately. Let's not discuss business tonight. No one spoke much after that. When dinner ended, I carried dishes toward the kitchen. My parents had gone into Dad's study. The door wasn't fully closed. Mom whispered, "We can't let Ethan lose everything." Dad sighed. Claire's farm is worth real money now. She'll understand. She doesn't need it the way he does. I froze. Every word hit harder than the last. Without making a sound, I placed the dishes down, walked out the front door, got into my truck, and drove home in complete silence. For nearly 3 hours, one thought repeated over and over in my mind. Almost $1 million. What had Ethan done? The next morning, I opened my laptop and started researching the cryptocurrency crash that had destroyed fortunes overnight. The more I researched, the clearer everything became. May 2022. The collapse of Terra/Luna, a cryptocurrency disaster that erased billions of dollars almost overnight. While millions of investors watched their savings disappear, I had been standing in my lavender field, harvesting my very first crop. While Ethan poured money into risky digital coins, I was pouring mine into soil. His investment vanished. Mine kept growing. The following evening, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Tell your brother, time's almost up. Deadline, August 20th. No more extensions. I replied, wrong number. There was no answer. The message had obviously been meant for my mother. Private lenders, not banks. The kind of people who didn't negotiate twice. I suddenly understood exactly why my parents had become interested in my farm again. Instead of waiting, I decided to move first. The next morning, I emailed Daniel Morgan. I'm ready to meet. His response arrived that same evening, even though it was a holiday. We scheduled a meeting immediately. I also called Rachel, my attorney. Then I texted Megan. Remember when I promised I'd repay everything you ever loaned me? That day might be closer than either of us expected. The meeting took place at a small cafe overlooking the river. Daniel arrived with another attorney. Rachel sat beside me. For nearly 2 hours, we talked. Finally, Daniel placed a folder on the table. You've built something much bigger than a lavender farm. You've built a recognizable brand. We'd like to acquire it. Everything? I asked. The land, the business, the trademarks, your online platforms, customer database, everything. He slid a document toward me. $2.7 million. I didn't react. Rachel quietly leaned toward me. Let's step outside. Standing in the parking lot, she folded her arms. They're testing you. That's not their real number. What should I ask for? 3.2 million. And don't sell yourself completely. Demand that you continue running the operation. You are the business. Without you, the value drops. We returned inside. I looked directly at Daniel. I appreciate the offer. But customers trust me, not a corporation. I'll agree to $3 million. On one condition. He smiled. Go ahead. I remain managing director for 2 years. Annual salary of $195,000. 4% profit sharing. Those terms aren't negotiable. Daniel exchanged a glance with his lawyer. Then he smiled again. Honestly, that's fair. We wanted you involved anyway. We'll prepare the paperwork. 2 days later, Rachel called. Congratulations! They accepted every condition. I closed my eyes. 3 years earlier, I had barely been able to replace a broken water heater. Now, someone had agreed to pay millions for the farm everyone else considered worthless. The contract was enormous, more than 40 pages. I read every sentence. Purchase price, $3 million. Managing director, 2-year agreement, annual salary, profit sharing, confidentiality clause. Everything exactly as we'd negotiated. When Rachel asked about the closing date, I surprised her. Can we move it to July 15th? That's very specific. Trust me. She smiled. I'll make it happen. 3 days later, Mom arrived without warning. She parked outside the farmhouse and walked straight toward me. No greeting, no compliment about the blooming fields, no hug. Your brother needs help. Serious help. I waited. He owes nearly $900,000. Your father and I can cover some of it, but not enough. Then she looked around the farm. This property solves everything. I already knew what was coming. You have 72 hours. Hand the farm back. Ethan will take ownership. Silence. She mistook it for hesitation. He'll sell it. Clear his debts. You'll still receive $60,000 to start over. $60,000 for a business worth nearly $3 million. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "And after I leave?" "Family comes first." "Your brother is 37. He can't rebuild from nothing." I looked around my lavender fields. I rebuilt from nothing. She sighed. "This isn't the same." "Why?" "Because Ethan made one mistake." I looked directly into her eyes. "No. He made hundreds." She stood. "Your father and Ethan will be here on July 15th. Be packed." Before getting into her car, she said one last sentence. "This is what family does." Then she drove away. I remained on the porch long after the dust had settled. Then I called Rachel. "I want witnesses. Reporters if possible. I want the closing to be public." She immediately understood. "What happened?" "My family just tried to take my farm." There was silence. Then she answered quietly, "Leave it to me." The following morning, Mom accidentally forwarded me an email. It had been written by Ethan. He was begging her for money. One paragraph stopped me cold. "Sell Claire's farm. She's just growing flowers. She can always get another job. I can't rebuild my life at 37. I read those lines again and again. Just growing flowers. That's what years of 14-hour days looked like to him. That's what sleepless nights, debt, risk, sacrifice, and thousands of lavender plants meant in his eyes. I immediately saved screenshots everywhere I could: phone, laptop, cloud storage. Then I forwarded the email to Rachel. Subject: "You'll want to read this before Tuesday." 3 minutes later, my mother texted, "Please ignore the email I accidentally sent." I looked at the message, smiled for the first time that day. She had no idea. She had just handed me exactly the evidence I needed. My mother sent one final message: "We'll talk on Tuesday." I never answered. Instead, I texted Megan, "I need a favor. If my parents show up at the ceremony, don't let me feel guilty." She replied almost instantly, "What happened?" I sent her Ethan's email. A few seconds later, my phone rang. "Claire?" "I know." "Growing flowers. That's all he thinks you've been doing?" "Apparently." "You're not giving them anything, right?" "No." "But if I start feeling sorry for them, remind me why I shouldn't." "I'll be standing beside you." That afternoon, I opened my laptop and created a guest list. Dr. Hannah Carter, Megan, local reporters, county officials, Rachel, Daniel and his investment team, business partners, neighbors, customers, friends I'd met through social media. 46 names in total. Then I sent an invitation. "You're invited to the official ownership transfer ceremony of Lavender Ridge Farm, July 15th, noon. Thank you for believing in this journey." By evening, 40 people had confirmed. The next day became a blur. I rented a large white tent, ordered catering, champagne, professional seating. Then I approved the biggest purchase of the week. A giant sign, nearly 8 feet wide. It read, "Welcome Lavender Ridge Farm, now part of Evergreen Capital Partners." Impossible to miss. When Megan saw the photo, she texted only one sentence: "They're never going to forget this day." That evening, I bought my first professional suit. Dark navy, simple, elegant. I hadn't worn heels since graduation. Back home, I stood in front of the mirror, again and again, practicing my speech. That night, sleep never came. Instead, I walked into the lavender fields beneath the moonlight. The rows stretched endlessly around me. 3 years earlier, everyone had seen failure. Tomorrow, they would finally see the truth. I whispered quietly into the night. Tomorrow, they'll find out what this land was really worth. A message arrived from Dr. Carter. Thank you for believing in this farm. I smiled before replying. I believed in myself. The farm simply gave me somewhere to prove it. Her response contained only one word: proud. July 15th, 2025. By 8:30, everything was ready. Rows of white chairs, the signing table, champagne chilling in silver buckets, the giant welcome sign standing beside the entrance. Guests began arriving before 11. Dr. Carter hugged me. Ready? I smiled. I've been ready for 3 years. Just before noon, Megan hurried toward me. They're here! My heart skipped. Who? Your brother. I stepped outside. A silver pickup rolled slowly toward the gate. Ethan climbed out. In the truck bed, 2 empty storage boxes, a large duffel bag. He had fully expected to move into my house that afternoon. Then he noticed the tent, the luxury vehicles, dozens of guests, men and women in business suits, the enormous welcome sign. He froze. For nearly 2 minutes, he simply stared. People around him began whispering. A moment later, another car arrived. My parents. Mom looked through the windshield, then noticed the sign. All color disappeared from her face. Dad said something quietly beside her. She didn't move. At 11:58, I stepped out from the tent. Navy suit, hair neatly tied back, clipboard in my hand. Ethan walked toward me. What is all this? Mom said you were giving me the farm, I answered calmly. The ceremony begins in 2 minutes. You're welcome to stay. Ceremony? For what? Before I could answer, Daniel Morgan approached. He extended his hand. You must be Ethan. Claire has accomplished something extraordinary. You should be proud of your sister. Ethan ignored the handshake completely. Exactly at noon, Rachel walked to the microphone. Thank you all for joining us today. She spoke about the abandoned farm, the years of work, the transformation. Then came the number. Today, this business has been independently valued at approximately $3 million. Gasps spread through the audience. I looked toward my parents. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad stared silently at the ground. The county commissioner spoke next. She praised the farm's environmental work, the jobs it had created, the tourism it had brought to the region. More applause, more cameras, more photographs. Finally, Daniel stepped forward. Evergreen Capital invests only in businesses with exceptional long-term potential. Claire exceeded every benchmark we evaluate. Then he smiled. Our initial offer was significant, but Claire negotiated something even more valuable. He paused. She refused to disappear. The audience laughed softly. She insisted on remaining managing director. Annual executive salary, profit participation, leadership authority. She's not walking away from this business. She's leading it into its next chapter. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. A journalist raised her hand. Ms. Bennett, what will you do with the money? I stepped toward the microphone. Every face turned toward me, including my family's. I answered slowly. First, I'll repay every person who believed in me when almost no one else did. I looked toward Megan, then toward Dr. Carter. And after that, I'll invest in people who are handed something the world calls worthless. Because sometimes the greatest opportunities arrive disguised as disappointment. The audience stood. Applause echoed across the lavender fields. Behind them, my parents remained completely silent. Camera flashes filled the air. Then Dr. Carter slowly stood. "May I say something?" Rachel smiled. "Of course." Dr. Carter stepped to the microphone. "I met Claire at a small farmer's market 3 years ago. She'd earned barely $40 that day, and she was happier than most people making thousands." The audience laughed softly. "I tested her soil and told her this land had potential." She paused. "What I didn't realize was that the greatest potential wasn't in the ground. It was standing right beside me." Her voice trembled. "I've watched Claire work 14-hour days under the summer sun. I've seen her repair irrigation lines in the middle of the night. I've watched her turn abandoned land into something extraordinary." She looked directly at me. "None of that happened because she was lucky. It happened because she refused to quit. That's character." She stepped away from the microphone. I blinked quickly, trying not to cry. Megan wasn't nearly as successful. She was already wiping tears from her face. The applause seemed to last forever. During the applause, Ethan turned toward his truck. Mom grabbed his arm. He pulled away, took several steps, stopped, then slowly returned, arms folded, jaw clenched. Rachel placed the contracts on the signing table. The notary explained where each signature belonged. Daniel signed first. Then she handed the pen to me. I used the same fountain pen I'd carried since college, a small reminder of where everything had begun. When the final signature was complete, the notary pressed the official seal onto the papers. "Congratulations," she announced. "The transaction is now complete." Champagne corks echoed across the field. Daniel raised his glass. "To Claire Bennett, entrepreneur, managing director, and living proof that persistence is more powerful than revenge." Everyone toasted. I looked toward my family. Only Dad remained standing there. Mom and Ethan had already walked away. Photographers gathered us together: Daniel, Dr. Carter, Rachel, Megan, the county commissioner. One reporter asked a final question. "Claire, how does it feel to transform property once considered nearly worthless into a company valued at over $3 million?" I looked straight into the camera. "It feels like proof that I was never the problem." Guests gradually began leaving. Dad quietly approached. "Could we talk?" I nodded. We walked inside the farmhouse, the very room where he'd handed me the deed years earlier. Mom and Ethan soon joined us. Ethan spoke first. "You knew. You knew I needed that money. And you sold everything anyway." I met his eyes. "I knew you wanted the farm. I didn't know how desperate things were until Mom came here." By then, the contracts had already been signed. He stared at me. "Already signed?" "Weeks before you arrived." Silence filled the room. He paced back and forth. "You could have shared the money." "I'm your brother," I answered calmly. "When Dad bought you a luxury condo, did you offer to share it with me?" "That was different." "How?" He couldn't answer. Mom stepped in. "Claire, your brother made mistakes. Don't punish him forever." I stood. "These weren't mistakes. They were choices. He left a secure career. He gambled on speculation, borrowed money, ignored every warning. Those were decisions." Mom's voice grew louder. "He's family. So am I." The room fell silent. Dad finally spoke. "Enough." He looked first at Ethan, then at me. "I enabled you. he said to my brother. "Every time something went wrong, I rescued you." Then he turned toward me. "And I underestimated you." His hands shook noticeably. "I thought giving you that land couldn't possibly help you." "I was wrong." His voice broke. "I was wrong about both of my children." For years, those were the words I'd wanted to hear, yet somehow, they no longer changed anything. I quietly replied, "You could have said that years ago." Instead, "I spent years wondering whether you were right about me." I walked toward the door. "I'm not paying Ethan's debts. I'm not giving anyone ownership of my business. But I'm also not saying goodbye forever." I looked at all three of them. Whether we become a family again depends on whether you're willing to apologize because you truly understand, not because you need something from me. Ethan started to speak. I gently shook my head. "I'm done. Please leave." Outside, Megan wrapped her arms around me. She didn't ask a single question. She already knew. As they drove away, I heard Dad quietly say through the open window, "I spent years trying to shape her into someone else. Instead, she became someone stronger than I ever imagined." 6 months later, the farmhouse office had been completely renovated, bright, warm, filled with people. 9 employees now worked for the business. At our monthly meeting, we reviewed the numbers. Revenue had exceeded every forecast, production kept growing. A nationwide grocery partnership was preparing to launch. The company continued expanding. After the meeting, I opened Instagram. More than 350,000 followers. One recent photo of snow-covered lavender fields had reached hundreds of thousands of people. The top comment read, "This is what healing looks like." I smiled. Life outside the farm had changed too. Ethan eventually declared bankruptcy. His apartment was gone. He moved back in with our parents and accepted an ordinary operations job. We hadn't spoken since the ceremony. Not until New Year's. A message arrived from an unfamiliar number. It was him. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He simply apologized for comparing us, for believing he deserved more, for thinking my success somehow belonged to him. I read it several times. A few days later, I finally replied, "Thank you. I'm not ready yet, but thank you." Dad's Parkinson's diagnosis reminded me that time moves only one direction. Mom sent a Christmas card. Inside were only a few handwritten lines. No excuses, no requests, only an apology. I placed it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I also wasn't ready to throw it away. One snowy evening, I walked alone through the dormant lavender fields. The plants slept beneath a blanket of white. They would bloom again in spring, just as they always had. I took one last photograph, posted it online. The caption read, "1 year into our new chapter. A field once called worthless now supports families, creates jobs, and reminds me every day that value isn't decided by the people who underestimate you." If someone hands you the thing nobody else wanted, don't assume they handed you a burden. Sometimes they unknowingly hand you your future. That was the greatest lesson the farm ever gave me. Not that success is the best revenge, but that the strongest form of success is building a life so meaningful that one day you no longer need revenge at all. The post spread faster than I expected. Within the first hour, more than 50,000 people had liked it. Thousands of comments poured in. The very first one was from Dr. Hannah Carter. "I've never been prouder." The second came from Megan. "I believed in you from the beginning." A few minutes later, a notification appeared that stopped me. Dad commented, The first comment he had ever left on any of my posts. "Your mother and I are proud of you. We should have told you much sooner." I read it once, then again, then one more time. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Sometimes, leaving a door closed isn't the same as locking it forever. The farmhouse was quiet. The heating system hummed softly. It was warm now, comfortable. Nothing like the freezing old house I'd moved into years before. The staff had gone home. For the first time all day, I was completely alone. I brewed a cup of lavender chamomile tea using flowers harvested from my own fields. Then I settled into the armchair beside the window. The room that had once felt abandoned now felt like home. I opened my laptop one last time. The contract with the national grocery chain was still there. Another reminder that this wasn't a dream. It was real. I closed the screen, looked slowly around the room. The peeling walls had been restored, the broken floors repaired. The old farmhouse everyone dismissed had become the heart of a thriving business. Outside, snow continued to fall across the lavender fields. The plants rested quietly beneath the white blanket, waiting for spring, just like they always did. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. A small smile crossed my face, not the smile of someone who had defeated other people, the smile of someone who had finally stopped trying to prove them wrong, someone who had planted hope in forgotten ground and lived long enough to watch it bloom. I looked through the window one final time and whispered, "They thought they were giving me something worthless." I smiled again. They never realized they were handing me my future. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. Your time and support truly mean the world to me. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps me create more meaningful stories for you.